The fourth plenary session now begins. May I kindly invite on the stage His Excellency Ivo Sieber, Ambassador of Switzerland to Vietnam, for moderating the session, and Her Excellency Nguyen Nguyệt Nga, Senior Advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, member of the ASEAN Women for Peace Registry, for joining the panelists. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's panel. Thank you very much. To join this final panel plenary session number 4, where we're asked to discuss where we need to be in 10 to 20 years from now. Building on the experience of the past 2 decades since the enactment of Security Council Resolution 1325, and on the discussions of the past 2 days, this plenary session will focus on women in peace building and women's leadership in the future. The session's main objective is for the keynote speakers and the panelists to discuss their visions for the upcoming 10 to 20 years, including emerging trends and issues that will have major impacts and challenges for full implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. The new developments such as climate security, cybersecurity, or health security need to be considered. These are in addition to the questions of how to reach a fundamental shift and tangible results in women's meaningful participation in peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building. Moreover, the issue of increased resources of financing to women's participation in socio-economic and non-military emerging security spheres also merit discussions. We are privileged to have 10 distinguished participants who have accepted our invitation, 3 keynote speakers and 7 panelists. To save as much time as possible for the discussions, and since the detailed CVs of all keynote speakers and panelists can be found in the conference packages, I will keep to their introductions very briefly. I'm happy to get the ball rolling and to introduce one at a time the 3 keynote speakers. Our first keynote speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Bineta Diop, Special Envoy for Women, Peace and Security of the chairperson of the African Union Commission and founder and chair of the board of Femmes Africaines Solidarité. Madam Diop, I think you're online, and I'm happy to pass you the floor.
Your Excellency, let me also recognize the keynote speaker, Excellency Pierre Olsen Fried, the State Secretary to the Minister of International Development Cooperation of Sweden, and also Ms. Kelly Currie, the Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issue, the U.S. State Department, all the distinguished panelists here present, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start with a word of gratitude to the government of Vietnam for convening this international conference as we come to the close of the year 2020, a year of convergence of commemorative moments for a number of foundational framework of the WPS, but also the Beijing Platform for Action. I also wish to salute and thank UN Women, the Executive Director, Pumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who are at the forefront on gender equality and women's empowerment in the world. And again, let me bring the greeting of the chairperson of the AU, Musa Faki Mohammed. So, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the leitmotif of this conference, as it has been stipulated, is from commitment to results. And indeed, these have been also the guiding line of the African Union Commission for the last 10 years. in the undertaking of women, peace, and security. Indeed, in 2010, the AU Peace and Security Council set the motion for enhanced accountability by member states in the delivery of WPS agenda. And I see many of our partners here, US, Norway, and other governments who have been partnering with us to have the accountability process put in place. So I was first appointed as the special envoy in 2014. And since then, we have also adopted the Continental Result Framework with a set of indicators for member states of the African Union to make sure that they deliver to their commitment. So I think right now, when I started, we had 17 national action plans. Right now, in our continent, we have 30 countries that have adopted NAP and six regional economic community that have regional action plan. And I think right now the continent, Africa, has the maximum of national action plan. But it's, though the adoption of NAP is an indication of the political will from the AU side, but we know that it's not enough. It's crystal clear that we are far from the set target, and that is the need to make sure that we reinvigorate and continuous monitoring and report of our action for accelerated delivery. In the face of COVID-19, we speak a lot about building back better. Despite its disruption and debilitating effects, the pandemic offers a reset moment to reflect on our system and chart path for a stronger and more inclusive future. I would like to share a few reflections in this perspective, if you allow me. It's critical to galvanize women leadership in the implementation of the WPS within state structure, but no state structure as well, including civil society groups and women's organizations. In this way, the African Union have created a group of women mediators called FemWise that help member state countries that are in need in mediation to get the support of those women to be deployed. In the same way, the African Union and the United Nations have also created Africa Women Leadership Network with the support of Germany to make sure that within Agenda 2063 and Global Agenda 2030, the women can be linking the nexus between peace, security, and development, which are very much sine qua non for a stable today and tomorrow. So leadership matter, and leadership in the face of COVID matter most. You know, we have conducted with Aulin, with UN Women, but also the Deputy Secretary General, solidarity missions, because we need to go in the field to support women that are at the front line. They are the ones that are resilient. We don't call them victims, but they are the ones that need support. And we need to be in solidarity with them. We have been in the Great Lakes region, the Lake Chad Basin, the Sahel, and the Horn of Africa. So it's always good that we have joint mission from region, from Africa and the UN, but also from Asia, so we can share also experience. I think we have also to create exchange practices, good practices. I would like to know what's happening in Vietnam for us to learn from you, and you also to learn from us. I see my sister from Namibia who are having, centers of excellence on women, peace, and security. Do we have other centers of excellence in the world? We can exchange our experience, our knowledge, our know-how as well. So let me also say that we have convened this year in the 20th anniversary, the first Africa Forum on WPS. I think it's important, like you doing in Vietnam, to have such a forum that bring together the women at the front line, but also the partners, the peace builders, the women peacekeeping, also the peace ambassadors, those who are champion, the women refugee or displaced, and as I said, those centers of excellence. We just concluded our first forum on Africa, and we will continue to share the space with African dealing with women, peace, and security. And this year we have issued the second report of the chairperson of the AU to feed into the report of the Secretary General. So the accountability is necessary, but we need to measure progress and to make sure that we link it to the Security Council in New York. So as we look forward, Ambassador, for the 10 to 20 years to come, I would like to propose few recommendations. We need to strengthen oversight and accountability. I think this is really necessary. It's not to adopt the National Action Plan only, but we need to have critical that oversight institutions, such as Parliament, to take responsibility in demanding that the member state integrate WPS in the national development agenda, provide adequate resources, and not just to the government, but also to the civil society. Civil society have to be part and parcel. And we need also to put in place the reporting mechanism at national level that include the women in different sectors. And we need to report regularly on the delivery on what we have promised to the women who are still waiting to see WPS implemented. Second recommendation, we need coordination and synergy. We work closely with UN Women on the ground in the involvement of women's organizations, to civil society, in the definition of WPS agenda and the rollout and monitoring for delivery. We need to, with our partners, to accompany the process so civil society be in the core of the delivering of WPS. Of course, in the past experience we have in Africa, with such as Ebola, and now the current COVID-19, there are solutions, and those solutions are within the communities. We see communities' involvement are very critical in terms of delivering to WPS. I will not go into how our AMISOM in Somalia are working on delivering in the actions, like PPE is a mask and other material to the community, but within the community. So I'm not going to tell you how the refugee women that I interview as well are integrating into their community as well. So as I conclude, I wish to reiterate our gratitude for this opportunity to the government of Vietnam and reaffirm the commitment of the AU and my office in building strong and mutual benefiting partnership for a better world. I thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for these very forward-looking statements, and also for the very helpful and useful and interesting suggestions that you make based on the African experience. May I now change slightly around the speakers list and invite Her Excellency Ms. Kelly E. Curry, Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues in the U.S. State Department, and the U.S. representative at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, to take the floor. Ambassador Curry, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you. I will only wish that I was able to join you in person for this important conference. This has been such a challenging year for all of us, and I have to give my kudos to the government of Vietnam for working so hard to pull this conference together and overcome the many obstacles we've faced to develop this exciting and innovative platform to talk about women, peace, and security, which is an issue that's so important to my own heart as our ambassador at large for global women's issue and the top priority at our office together with women's economic empowerment, but one that we've been working with the government of Vietnam on for many years and have been very intensely working this year in support of this conference. And we're really proud to co-sponsor this session of the conference, which is about looking forward and how we continue to take forward the mantra of this conference of turning commitment into results. And I have to, Bonetta is such a hard act to follow. It's great to see you, even virtually, but her authenticity as a voice from the front lines of women, peace, and security, and the key recommendations that she's putting forward are so spot on. And it really is just a pleasure to follow her, but she's also a tough act to follow because she comes at this with such a strong perspective and with such experience and such a great heart for these issues. It's also wonderful that we were able to have my great colleague and partner in implementation of women, peace, and security, Assistant Secretary Clark Cooper, speak to the conference yesterday on the topic of the future of women in peacekeeping, which is such an important issue. And we're really thrilled to see the effort that the government of Vietnam and the other partners in this conference have taken to ensure that security sectors, ministries of defense, and others who are so critical in terms of our partnerships to actually make traction on this important agenda are participating fully in this conference and able to contribute their perspectives as well. As I'm sure Clark made very clear yesterday, our administration has made women, peace, and security a top priority, and we have taken some really important steps to give life to the theme of this conference. As starting in 2017, when we signed into law the Women, Peace, and Security Act, which, again, when Bonetta talks about getting these things into national legislatures, we've done that. We've had such tremendous support from our Congress to actually put the Women, Peace, and Security into our national law. And I believe the United States is still the first country to have actually passed national level legislation institutionalizing the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. And we're still very proud of that fact. And we continue to work against that legislation and use that as a powerful tool within our own system to help reform and enable the voices that are fighting for women, peace, and security, and the changes that we need to make internally in the United States in our foreign policy and security apparatus, as well as how we engage with our partners who are so enthusiastic about working with us on this agenda that whether we're having a bilateral economic dialogue or a quadrilateral dialogue about trade, they bring up women, peace, and security. And it's always, it never surprises me, but it often surprises many of the men at the table that our counterparts want to talk about women, peace, and security in every engagement that we have with them. And I think that this has been one of the real pleasant and great surprises for me in this job is seeing the level of enthusiasm that we have from our partners up around the world to engage on this issue and from every region. It's just been incredible. This summer, this past summer in June, the State Department, the Department of Defense, our Agency for International Development, and our Department of Homeland Security released new implementation plans to help us keep moving forward on the Women, Peace, and Security Act implementation and implementing this agenda. And we've set for ourselves very audacious and ambitious goals of really doing what we're supposed to do in terms of turning words into action and turning commitment into results. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing both internally and with our partners. And I think that it's, the topic of this conference and this session could not be more apt as we go forward and think about what else we need to do to realize these commitments and turning them into results. And while we've seen 10 related resolutions in the Security Council on women, peace, and security, we continue to struggle to move the needle meaningfully in some key areas, as you've no doubt heard throughout the course of this conference. Worse than that, we continue to face attacks on the underlying and really critical normative framework for women, peace, and security, well after this matter should be settled and should not be subject to debate. It's imperative that our statements, our international commitments, and our partnerships move beyond having to make the case and make the argument for women, peace, and security. We all know the statistics. We all know what happens when you involve more women in peace processes, when you involve more women in peacekeeping. We know, even though we continue to struggle with data and we continue to need better data about what we're doing and about how these things are being implemented, we have seen the positive impacts in the context where the women, peace, and security agenda is being implemented. So we know it works, and it's a question of just having the political will to actually use these great tools that we've developed over the past 20 years. And that's where the challenge often is the most serious. It's also about getting more women at the table in the right places. And as important as it is to make sure that women's organizations are there, as Benetta said so eloquently, it's also important that women are serving in the roles of special envoys, that women are the conveners who are bringing together the parties to conflicts, and that women are, as women have and as essential roles at the table as the men with guns who started the conflicts in the first place. It's not enough for us to continue to take the same old approaches that we've taken in the past, where we bring together a bunch of men with guns who started a conflict or created the conditions of conflict and crisis and ask them to solve the problems that they've caused in the first place. We have to change this mentality about how we approach peacemaking and peacekeeping. It's got to change, or we're going to keep making the same mistakes, having the same weak results and the same unsustainable outcomes. And we've just got to, and accountability, as the United said, is absolutely fundamental to this. Together with our allies, the United States is building foundations in the areas that enjoy consensus on this agenda. And we're working through multilateral fora to really build out tangible opportunities for women to meaningfully participate in these processes. And we are continuing to work on our own pipeline to make sure that we have women available and ready to step into these roles. And we see women, whether it's my friend Stephanie Williams, who's working on the Libya case, or our great friend Lise Grande, who will soon be leaving the UN system, unfortunately, who's worked in Yemen and Iraq as a key leader in helping to address those serious conflicts. We are ready, and we've got the women there who can lead on these issues, who can do so effectively, and who have a proven track record of results in doing so. So I want to make sure that we're continuing to work across that space, because even as the Secretary General has made some pretty substantial and impressive improvements in terms of the leadership team of the UN, we continue to see, when we look across at the people who are placed in charge of critical processes, that it's pretty much all men, and it draws from the same group of leaders, that we need to diversify that pool. And we need more women from the global south as well, who are being called into those roles as mediators and as special envoys. I also want to talk about this continuing attack on the normative framework that we're seeing. We see it in the Security Council. We just saw it, regrettably, last month, when we were engaged in a debate on the 20th anniversary resolution in the Security Council, where veto-wielding permanent members of the Security Council continue in efforts to weaken that normative framework, to undermine it by using language that suggests that this is not a core element of the Security Council's work, and that women, peace, and security is somehow not fundamental to international peace and security. Again, these are areas that should be well settled by now. These are not things that are up for debate anymore. 20 years after the passage of UNSCR 1325, we really should be further along in terms of advancing that normative framework and not having to defend it every time it comes up. And so I call upon those member states that continue to think that there's area for negotiation here. Stop it. Just cut it out. We're tired of having to keep explaining to you over and over again why this is important, why this is essential, why this is necessary. We should be able to move forward and advance this agenda. And we need you to start being more accountable and joining with us in this effort instead of trying to undermine it. We have to also take this opportunity to really give women, as Bonetta said, those opportunities to be agents of change. As we look across the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen women do remarkable things as part of the response and recovery. While women have suffered disproportionately from this pandemic, it is absolutely wrong to characterize them as victims. Women have been incredible leaders in responding to this pandemic and driving the recovery from it. And we need to continue to make sure that they have those opportunities and are given those meaningful roles and voices in doing so. This has been part of the United States response in terms of the billions of dollars that the United States has provided to response to the pandemic, whether it's in healthcare, humanitarian response, economic assistance, and even in security assistance. We continue prioritizing not only the roles of women and the needs of women, but also making sure that their voices are helping us in this response and that they are able to serve as drivers of the response and recovery. So I think that we need to look deeper as we continue to look forward and as we continue to work on championing these results, and look at how countries, as my colleague Bonetta talked about, are developing their own internal frameworks, whether it's building out the legal architecture to ensure the rights of women and girls are protected at the grassroots level, that they have the ability to live their fullest and best lives, that they have economic opportunity, that they have opportunities to participate in political institutions, in educational institutions, in all aspects of the lives of their communities. We know that when women are fully empowered and meaningfully engaged, it helps to strengthen communities. It makes them more stable, more peaceful, and more prosperous. This is an untapped resource that that at the country level, at the subnational level, we need to do more to encourage countries and partners to take advantage of, and to see as the untapped resource and as the treasure that it is, that they should be looking to leverage. And this is not a nice to have thing. This is not a niche issue. This is a real store of value for countries. Our own experience in the United States has shown this. We owe our prosperity to the changes in the past 150 years since women have really been able to more fully participate in our society, whether it's through the right to vote earned in our country 100 years ago, or whether it's the freedom to work in any job and sector that they choose. And so we really need to continue to work across all these elements to make sure that women are fully empowered. But as we think about women, peace, and security, we have to remind ourselves that despite the name of this great agenda, it's not just about women. We absolutely need our male allies, and we need governments and decision-making to be more reflective of and responsive to the entire populations they serve. And that's what this is really about at the end of the day, making sure that we are valuing the inherent dignity of all human beings, and that we are giving all of the people of our countries and our world an opportunity to fully participate and to make their contributions to the future. So we will continue to remain committed to protecting the rights that we hold dear in our country and that we believe are the birthright of every citizen. And we will continue to call on each and every country, participating in this conference and participating in all multilateral institutions to join with us in advancing this agenda. We still have a lot of work to do over the next 20 years, but with the kind of commitment and partnerships that we've been developing and continue to build on, I know that we can do this. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and best of luck for the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Curry, for these very encouraging words. I think you underscored how important partnerships are and how important it is more to really have women involved and included in WPS activities on every level. Thank you also for joining us at the very early hour in Washington, D.C. It's very much appreciated for this support. I understand that we have a bit of a communication problem with Stockholm, so State Secretary Fried is currently offline, so I suggest we move on with the panel discussions and maybe slot State Secretary Fried in when he's back online. So this allows me to first of all thank the two keynote speakers for their contribution. And I'm now happy to move on to the panelists, which I understand most of them are online. And of course, Madame Na here is on the panel on the stage with me. To launch the discussion, all panelists have been provided with the following key questions to frame the discussion. These questions are, what concrete commitments do participating member states make for implementation in 2021 to 2022, including new emerging threats? What peer advocacy and peer pressure strategies can do or should Friends of Women, Peace and Security plan to employ to accelerate implementation and accountability for women, peace and security commitments across the globe? What partnerships are critical to ensure that women, peace and security agenda remains a priority and a conflict prevention strategy? How is it possible to secure a prominent, safe and strategic space for civil society to lead peace-building work on the ground? And finally, the panelists are also invited to discuss key decisions that need to be made in domestic and foreign policy domains to ensure adequate financing. Each panelist will have 5 minutes for her intervention, and thank you very much for observing this time limit and to take up these questions as basis of the discussions. It's now my privilege to introduce the 5 panelists and then invite them to take the floor one after the other. First up and joining us from Singapore is Dr. Naleen Hazer. Dr. Hazer is a member of the UN Secretary General's High-Level Advisory Board on Mediation, as well as a member of the Board of Trustees of the National University of Singapore. Previously, she served as Executive Secretary of SCAP and Executive Director of UNIFEM, and she was one of the pen holders at the time in drafting Security Council Resolution 1325. We can expect a lot of insights. Dr. Hazer, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Excellencies, let me first express my very deep appreciation to Vietnam and UN Women for organizing this very important meeting to celebrate the 20th anniversary of 1325 and for the numerous efforts to advance the women, peace and security agenda. It is my pleasure to be part of this panel and to thank the keynote speakers for their important ideas. Excellencies, much has already been done in our collective efforts to implement the WPS agenda, yet so much remains to be done to accelerate its implementation over the next 10 years, given the changing peace and security landscape. In the emerging landscape, our concept of security will need to change to include health security, cyber security, climate security, addressing inequalities, upholding human rights and good governance. understanding the linkages between peace, sustainable development, and humanitarian action. The empowerment of women is even more critical to prevent the further fracturing of society, to build foundations for restoring confidence and sustaining peace. Let me highlight 4 ways of shifting us forward. 1, mindset change at all levels. Entrenched patriarchal attitudes, unequal social structures, politics that divides, and lack of resources have all held back progress in implementing 1325. These will have to change. It is vital that we use our political will now to press for the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women, from political decision-making to peacemaking, from pandemic response to peace building. If we start now, in 10 years, our governance structures will be more inclusive and our policy making will be using the whole of society approach and be more effective, enriched by the perspectives, experiences, and talents of all our population, not half. 2, accelerate women's participation and leadership as keys to a more inclusive, sustainable, and secure future. One of the best ways of starting this is to have more women as mediators. I'm very happy that today we have growing networks of women mediators. I would now like to see more women appointed as lead mediators, more gender parity in mediation support groups, a better understanding of the gender dimension in thematic areas and in specific geographical contexts. 3rd, invest in the power of partnership and communities to build a new social contract, a social protection floor of fundamental rights to unlock the agency and potential of everyone. 20 years ago, when I addressed the Security Council as the Executive Director of UNIFEM, Ms. Ambassador, as you have mentioned, on the needs to have a new peace and security paradigm, we understood the importance of strategic and complementary partnerships to achieve the WPS framework. I'm particularly pleased that the Deputy Minister of Namibia is here with us today. Holding the presidency of the Security Council in October 2000, Namibia worked very closely with UNIFEM and our civil society partners to deliver 1325. Going forward, we need to work in closer collaboration with our strategic partners, including regional organizations and women's civil society, to implement the vision laid out in 1325 for just, equal, and peaceful societies. These have already been mentioned by our keynote speakers. However, to make a real difference to people on the ground, it is urgent to build trust with local communities and invest in community-led resilience and response systems. There are already good examples of how working with women's civil society has brought new perspectives, helping to build trust and confidence among local communities. Now it is time to turn this into standard practice for the years ahead. At the same time, we need to realize that the rise of extremism has led to the closing of spaces for women and an increase in violence against women. In the age of social media, the misinformation and hate speech in the public arena often target women working for peace in the community. In the next 10 years, all member states must ensure that there are stronger legal protections for women rights defenders, as well as electoral reforms to facilitate women's safe political participation as candidates and voters. Finally, invest in the architecture of peace and security. Together with the ceasefire, the UN Secretary General has placed conflict prevention and diplomacy for peace at the top of his agenda, stressing the need to invest in the infrastructure of peace and security, the values, the mindsets, the institution that sustain peace. The Security Sustainable Development Nexus and opportunities for global cooperation are critical for achieving the SDGs, including the Peace Building and State Building Goal 16. So to sum up, in the next 10 years, I would like to see a more people-centered multilateralism for global problem solving, and that women have achieved their full and rightful place in shaping the decisions and priorities of their communities and countries. I thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hazer. A very powerful statement, and thank you also for your insights from 20 years ago when 1325 was negotiated. I understand that Mr. Fried is unable to log in at this time, and I understand that we are inviting the Swedish ambassador here, Ambassador Anna, to give the statement. I don't know if you are ready to do it now. Would that be okay? Okay, very good. So I'll pass the floor on to you, Anne. Thanks.
So I will read a statement on behalf of State Secretary Per Olsson Fried, who is unable to join us for technical reasons. Excellencies, colleagues and friends, thank you for providing this opportunity to discuss women, peace and security with a visionary perspective. We welcome the Vietnamese efforts to accelerate the implementation of the agenda with a focus on concrete actions. We warmly acknowledge the increasing role Vietnam is playing as a committed global actor, increasing its contributions to UN peacekeeping, its upcoming contribution to EU crisis management in Africa, and inclusive recruitment of women in key roles. Before looking forward, we need to acknowledge that much has been achieved. The Women, Peace and Security agenda today is supported by more actors and includes emerging trends such as climate change and digitalization, as we have heard during these 3 days. Looking ahead, there are additional areas where women, peace and security could contribute substantially. Let me come back to this. To begin with, I would like to highlight some general aspects where we need to see progress. Good leadership is a prerequisite for sustainable solutions. Actors in peace processes must safeguard the participation of women. We need to ensure continued implementation in the field and initiatives that promote gender-responsive conflict resolution. We need ownership and responsibility, not just by experts, but by all actors. I would like to mention 3 examples. Women need to be part of delegations to peace talks, as well as part of the implementation of agreements. Inclusive peace talks lead to more sustainable results. Peace negotiations should be informed by a gender perspective to make sure that the needs of the whole population are considered. Consultations with women's organizations should be conducted regularly, and local initiatives should be connected to the formal negotiations. I have, that is our State Secretary has, been engaged in the transition process in Sudan and have seen firsthand the positive effects of women's involvement. Sweden has, for example, contributed with gender expertise in the government offices to promote a gender-responsive transition process. Secondly, reporting from conflict situations should include gender analysis and sex disaggregated data to ensure that we have a full picture to base our actions on. Security assessments need to address the security of women, including against sexual violence. The third example is security sector reform, which should be gender responsive, as we heard from Professor Egnell yesterday, and allow for both women and men to contribute. Reforms in the security sector and other parts of society should benefit the whole population. Sweden contributes actively in all these areas. Through support to partners, including civil society, we contribute to development of national action plans and women's mediators networks. We have developed senior leadership trainings, and we provide local capacity building in the field. We also deploy Swedish gender experts to civilian and military peace missions. I would also like to state that consistency matters. From our experiences as an elected member of the UN Security Council in 2017 and 2018, we know that consistent efforts to promote women, peace and security yield results. During our tenure, all mandates for peacekeeping and political missions got new and strengthened women, peace and security provisions. Presidential statements adopted contained references to the situation and participation of women. More civil society briefers than ever before were invited, which resulted in inclusive deliberations and better informed decisions. Yet, we continuously must monitor that these achievements translate into concrete action on the ground, making a difference in people's lives. Civil society plays an important role to monitor and partner in the implementation to ensure inclusive solutions for lasting impact. As Sweden takes on the chairpersonship in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, in 2021, we are now exploring how these experiences can best be made relevant in an OSCE context. Let me now come back to a few issues that I believe will be key to address moving ahead. First, health issues. This year, we commemorate a landmark UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security during a pandemic that has already cost more than 1 million lives worldwide. In addition to the health, socioeconomic, and humanitarian consequences, the pandemic also risks worsening existing conflicts. The pandemic also has a disproportionate impact on women's and girls' access and essential health services, including sexual and reproductive health services, which causes a devastating increase in child and maternal death. Women civil society organizations have played a key role in spreading information and supporting delivery of humanitarian aid and other needed supplies. We cannot let the pandemic result in us moving backwards on the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Instead, we must use the opportunity to build forward better and more equal. Secondly, economic issues. Women's economic empowerment is closely linked to women's participation in political life, in society, and in peace processes. Women's lack of economic power hinders effective peace building. It gives women less access, information, and decision-making power, and it makes women more vulnerable to violence. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted how women's economic empowerment is important for a resilient response. In Yemen, women have highlighted the socioeconomic consequences of the humanitarian crisis, reinforced by COVID-19. The need to secure salaries for civil servants and opportunities for small businesses is critical for women's participation and agency as they increasingly take on the role as breadwinners in the family. Within the framework of UN Women's Initiative Generation Equality Forum, Sweden is a co-leader of the Global Action Coalition on Economic Equality. The Action Coalition is co-led together with South Africa, Mexico, Germany, Spain, and OECD, and several civil society organizations like CARE International and Femnet. Sweden prioritizes economic reforms for gender equality in the labor market, and a feminist trade policy. Thirdly, women's participation and gender perspective in digitalization issues needs to be stressed. As the normative development in the multilateral system is in its initial stages, we have the chance to do things right from the beginning instead of adding women and gender at the end. This would be relevant when it comes to information and disinformation in conflict situations, addressing online violence against women, but also addressing the gender divide and using new possibilities to include women. Lastly, climate and security. Climate change is a defining issue for our generation. In a world facing serious and urgent environmental challenges, It is important to ensure that women, girls, men and boys have equal opportunities to contribute to supporting our sustainability goals, including those in the environment and climate field. It contributes to conflict prevention and to sustainable and peaceful development. Gender equality, peaceful societies, and environmentally and climate sustainable development are all cross-cutting perspectives in Sweden's development cooperation. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, we must not lose momentum, but accelerate the implementation of women, peace and security agenda. The future will benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, and thanks for delivering your State Secretary's speech with a very wide range of absolutely relevant suggestions. I now move back to the panel discussion and invite as the next panelist joining us from Windhoek, Her Excellency the Honorable Janelle Matundu, Deputy Minister for International Relations and Cooperation of Namibia. Honorable Deputy Minister, the floor is yours. We don't have sound. Maybe the technicians can check. I think we're facing a slight technical problem. If that's agreeable with you, Madam Nung, I would move on to you. It's an honor to have you on the panel here with me. Without any technical problems, I understand, and I'm sure. I'm very honored to invite you, Ambassador Nguyet Nga. Ambassador Na is a senior advisor in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam and a member of the ASEAN Women Peace Registry, who just recently, I understand, last month, chaired an ASEAN conference on women, peace, and security. We're happy to have your insights in your capacity, but also in your role as ASEAN coordinator. The floor is yours. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sieber. It is my great pleasure and honor to attend this very important and timely conference organized here with the support of the UN, and especially the plenary session 4 on how we can work together to move forward with WPS agenda in the years to come. I appreciate the very insightful views, perspectives, and especially recommendations of the previous speakers in this regard. And I'm so encouraged that to see how WPS agenda remains a very crucial part of our international cooperation this year, as reflected in this our event today. As we all know that this year, 2020, is a very pivotal year for, okay, I have some, yes, next slide, please. A pivotal year to revitalize commitment, our commitment to the resolution 1325 and our WPS agenda. This marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the 5th anniversary of the adoption of SDGs, and this year also marks the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action on Gender Equality, and the 20th anniversary of the landmark resolution 1325. We are pleased with the, we are so encouraged by the very strong commitment and progress made so far worldwide and especially in ASEAN. With Vietnam and Indonesia in the United Nations Security Council, a number of strides have been made this year on WPS in Southeast Asia, as many of you may be aware, and notably the first ever East Asia leader statement on women, peace and security, and the ASEAN Ministerial Dialogue on WPS. A new initiative has also taken to set up a Southeast Asia network on women peace mediator, and a number of activities such as webinar and capacity building have been organized with various partners for our members of ASEAN Women Peace for Peace Registry. As many of you have said, that but still, a lot needs to be done because of the fast changing, international landscape of security, peace, and development, and because of the greater volatility of the landscape. And as we all have first-hand experience, the COVID-19 pandemic is changing our very concept of security, as Dr. Naleen Hazer says. I really do agree with her. And we see that the pandemic has affected our societies and our economies at their cores, creating a crisis of health, a crisis of economic crisis, security crisis, and humanitarian crisis at a global level. And that shows that our concepts of security need to be include human security and encompassing health security, food security, economic security, social security, climate security, and the good governance. And the nature of security risks also changing, becoming more multidimensional and transboundary. The topics impacting global peace and security and development in the years to come would be the unsettling political, geopolitical landscape, economic instability, social unrest, climate change, pandemics, natural disasters, and digital fragmentation. And we also see new issues and challenges to global peace and security and development, especially in the age of super interconnected and social media. Prejudicial information, misinformation, and digital gaps can hinder efforts of, to fight against discrimination and to promote reconciliation and equality. And as many of the speakers have mentioned, that we are now facing a real danger that the pandemic will erase all the progress, important progress, that women have made over the decades. So it is time for us to reiterate and to revitalize our commitment and readiness to solid and comprehensive implementation of the WPS agenda and resolution 1325. To translate our commitment into actions and substantive results, from our perspective, there are 4 things to consider. Number 1, forcing the peace, security, sustainable development nexus. Fostering sustainability and inclusiveness should not only be seen as a goal in itself, but also as a defense against threats to peace and security. Peace building should encompass plans to realize SDGs. We need to put women and girls at the heart of our plan and strategy to tackle and recover from the pandemic. And it is really very imperative in this globalized world to enhance lifelong skills, development, and digital literacy for women and girls to bridge the digital divide. Second, harnessing the new technologies, networks, and broad people engagement to ensure an inclusive and holistic implementation of WPS agenda. This will enable us to have greater mobility of women's organizations, the youth, private sector, the media, institution, and other stakeholders to help promote strong connections, share the values, culture of peace, and make our societies more people-driven and inclusive. And third, taking bolder actions to mainstream gender to ensure women's increased participation in the development and implementation of strategy to conflict prevention and resolution, recovery, reconstruction, and political process, and in peace building and peacekeeping efforts. And finally, I would like to suggest that we need to build up a solid, multi-layered network and partnership for WPS agenda for the implementation of Resolution 1325 with the UN, UNDP, and UN Women as the key driver. Strong global networks are crucial to us to raise global awareness and to have more greater opportunity to enhance the role of women in peace and security and prosperity. So we need to strengthen, I agree with Dr. Naleen Hazer, that we need to strengthen networks of WPS experts, mediators, advocates, and negotiators, at all levels, national, regional, interregional, and global. This will help us to strengthen significantly best practice sharing, capacity building for WPS, while the public of understanding of the importance of WPS and promotion of cultural peace. Partnership and cooperation like ASEAN-UN Plan of Action provide important impetus to mainstreaming gender and strengthen women's role in building and sustaining peace and prosperity. So I thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Na, for your statement underlining how important partnerships are to reinforcing the women, peace, and security agenda. I now understand that Her Excellency the Honorable Janelle Matundu, Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of Namibia, is online, so I'm happy to invite you, Deputy Minister, to take the floor. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I hope you can hear me now. From the onset, allow me to tender the apology of Honorable Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. She will not be here with us due to extenuating reasons beyond her control. My remarks were based on the question 2, which is what peer pressure strategies can do should Friends of Women, Peace and Security plan to employ to accelerate implementation and accountability for women, peace and security commitments across the globe. I wish to start by thanking the government of Vietnam, together with the United Nations, for organizing this important and timely international conference on women, peace and security. This conference has come at the right time when we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. As many of you know, when Namibia was campaigning to join the Security Council back in 1999, we were determined to make a positive and lasting contribution to international peace. At that time, Namibia had only been independent for 9 years, and our experience in the liberation struggle certainly informed the decision to pursue progressive policies for the maintenance of the world peace. By the time Namibia joined the Security Council in 1999, we were ready to introduce the holistic concept that women can and must contribute to peace processes. The idea was premised on women's experience in the liberation struggle and also informed by regional and international experiences of women. Although at the time the agenda was not the most popular, Namibia managed to get the support of civil society, women's organizations, and many UN member states. And in October 2000, under the presidency of Namibia, the Security Council adopted the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Ladies and gentlemen, if this 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325 has shown us anything, it is that the normative frameworks that exist are numerous and are fairly understood by all. However, implementation remains our main challenge. A number of countries all over the world have adopted forward-looking and innovative national action plans, and we are certainly hopeful that more countries will implement their national plan of actions. Due to varying factors, effective implementation remains a challenge, and that is where the focus of the international community needs to be in the next 10 to 20 years. The global study done in 2015 showed us that we are lagging far behind the goals we set ourselves, and that countries truly need to step up their efforts in increasing the number of women in peacekeeping. Going forward, political will and the willingness to take certain risks has to increase. For Namibia, some bold decisions over the last several years, including the introducing a gender quota in national politics, has resulted in women taking up 47% representation in the National Assembly. Obtaining support from various international organizations will help to move the peace and security agenda forward. On our side, Namibia introduced the Women, Peace and Security Agenda as a permanent item at SADC, as well as being strongly supportive at the African Union level. Ladies and gentlemen, we should develop strategies to promote women's participation in decision-making, including engaging with national electoral systems and political parties to provide an equal playing field for women candidates. There is also need to support leadership development for women and girls so that we assist them in cultivating their political potential and professional skills. Furthermore, there is a need for an increased integration of gender in national planning and budgeting as part of our strategies to train national officials to execute plans and programs and hence strengthen the ability of women to advocate for decision-making positions and political leadership in general. In addition, we should broaden the space for women's participation in peace processes, including training women, mediators, and advocating gender equality measures as critical to security policies and practices. In conclusion, Your Excellency, as Namibia's commitment towards women, peace and security on the 31st October 2020 and on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, we have launched the International Women's Peace Center in Windhoek, Namibia. This is an achievement of which we are proud of and hope it will contribute to the advancement of women, peace, and security agenda. The center will focus inter alia on the research and training aspects of mediation and negotiations, as well as capacity building and support for women to deal with issues related to gender-based violence during conflict and post-conflict, among others. To this end, we will reach out to various international partners to tap their rich experiences and apply the useful lesson to strengthen the work of the center. I thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Minister, for this very important intervention and for stressing the importance of women participation in decision-making and in peace processes, and to strengthen women leadership, clearly something that is important, very important for the WPS agenda. I now have the honour and pleasure to move on to the next panelist joining us from London. She is Baroness Annabel Goldie, Minister of State in the Ministry of Defence of the United Kingdom, and I'm happy to pass on the floor to you, Baroness.
Thank you, and Your Excellencies, fellow conference attendees, and sisters. Good afternoon to you, and first of all, congratulations to Vietnam for hosting so successfully this very important conference, and also for inviting me to participate. I must say, I thought listening to Benetta, she really sort of nailed what we're here for and what it's all about, because, you know, when she talked about taking commitment to result, she highlighted galvanizing women, solidarity, not just regional, but global, and she talked of oversight and accountability. And, you know, I think that really set the strapline for what we're talking about at this session of the conference, because to me, galvanizing women, demonstrating solidarity, delivering oversight and achieving accountability, it is about making commitments and sticking to them. It's about creating partnerships. It's about using our individual influence as women and as representatives of our different nations. It's that incomparable female peer power. And what a punch we can pack. It's about accelerating meeting our commitments and targets. And as recent unwelcome challenges have highlighted, it's about changing mindsets at all levels. So if I look at commitments, I want to applaud the United Nations Secretary General's gender parity strategy and his roadmap, because I think that gives us something to focus on about increasing the participation of uniformed women in peacekeeping against measurable targets. And there's been a welcome increase in that between 2017 from 21% to 41% this year. And I'm very pleased that over 20 states, including the United Kingdom, they're exceeding their 2020 target for contingent troop deployments, and a similar number are exceeding the target for military staff officers deployed to leadership positions. And that's good. That's leading by example, and we all need to be mindful of that. On the issue of partnerships, you know, I think partnerships are absolutely critical to all of this. Partnerships can come in different forms at different levels, but I want to look particularly at partnerships with civil society, because that links into something else I'm going to mention about changing mindset. But I think these partnerships with civil society are key, because these are the ones that harness intelligence from the ground. They obtain expertise and knowledge of the challenges and also the needs of local communities. So I think we need to retain the partnerships we've got. We need to enhance them. And of course, we also have another important component to partnerships. That's the partnerships across different networks. They're invaluable. The UK was very proud to have provided £1 million to women mediators across the Commonwealth network to increase participation of women in peace processes and mediation at a local, at a national, at a global level. And of course, we've got the Global Alliance of Regional Women Mediator Networks using its collective advocacy and outreach to push for women's meaningful participation in peace processes. But what about us as women? What about our power to advocate? What pressure can we apply to accelerate implementation and accountability? Well, certainly the UK will continue to push for and support the development of national action plans on women, peace and security, and that's most notable in our focus countries of Afghanistan, Myanmar, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Iraq, Libya, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, and Syria. And I think that's a key means by which we can drive delivery of the WPS agenda. And then, of course, there is this important issue of civil society, and that links back to what I was talking about changing mindsets, changing attitudes, because I think the big argument that, many of us thought we had won, and yet as Kelly very pertinently reminded us, there is evidence that maybe we haven't won it at the levels where we would like to have won it, and we have to keep working at that. And I think the big compelling argument we have to get over is that when women are involved in civil society, when women are involved in these peacekeeping missions, when women are involved in mediation and conflict resolution, there is actually a good result for everybody, for men, for boys, for women, for girls. And I think, as Kelly indicated, the evidence is there of that happening. Where we get involved, where we are allowed to use our skills and expertise as women and bring our distinctive contribution to that particular arena, we demonstrate that good things happen and good results follow. So I think it's very important that we do change these mindsets and we ensure that we expand women's participation, because that is essential as an operation enabler. The UK is proud to have funded the International Civil Society Action Network to develop the protection framework for women peace builders. And this framework provides guidance to states and multilaterals on how best to prevent and how to respond to threats and reprisals against peace builders. And I encourage others to commit to endorsing the recommendations made in the framework within their remit. And of course, we must always be conscious of the changing environment. A number of contributors have referred not just to Ebola, which many African nations had to contend with, and it was a lethal disease. We've all been now coping with the pandemic of COVID-19, and women, I am afraid, have been impacted excessively by that, because the equalities that it lays bare are a stark reminder of how women can lead to turn the tide as actors and decision makers at all levels, whether that's in the health centre, but also more broadly on peace and political processes. So I think it's a question of us all as sisters, if I may use that term to embrace everyone, including the gentlemen. I think it's a question of us as sisters being conscious of the power we really do have, just looking at this conference, looking at the calibre of the contributions throughout the 3 days of the conference, having the privilege of listening to the contributions in this session. My goodness, there's an awful lot that we can be proud of, and we have to be determined and resolute. As Benetta said, solidarity, joined together, there's something very important we can do. We must never slacken in our resolve, lose our enthusiasm, or deviate from our purpose in doing it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Baroness Goldie, underscoring how important partnerships are also among networks to build solidarity and impact is truly a very strong message. I'm moving on to our next panelist now. Joining us from Bern is my good colleague, Mrs. Mo Blaker. Mo Blaker is Special Envoy of the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs and, among a number of functions, also chair of the Atrocity Prevention Platform in the state-led Global Alliance Against Mass Atrocities Crime, or the GAMAC. I'm happy to pass on the floor to Mo Blaker. I see she's not online.
See me?
Hello, can you hear us, Mo?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you turn on your camera?
Okay. My camera is on, but it seems that it doesn't work. But I won't take.
Okay, I think you.
Let me try again.
There we go. Okay.
Camera. Yes, here I am. Do you see me?
Good to see you, and the floor is yours.
Good day, everyone. I'm extremely honored to be here. Thank you, Ambassador, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and as the person who spoke before, sisters and brothers. And congratulations to the government of Vietnam for this very, very successful conference. As I speak now, I can't but think about the next generations. My responsibility, our responsibility, is to prepare a safer world, better world.
Sorry, Mo.
Begins today.
Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you. The connection is not very good. Could you maybe try to switch off your camera? That might improve the quality of the connection.
I will. Switch off. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I will switch off. Stop video.
Okay. All right. Let's try it.
Is that all right? Do you hear me well?
It's better, yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. As we have said repeatedly during this conference, the global COVID pandemic, the climate crisis, and the exponential development of new technologies without global governance are indeed major risks for the whole planet and humanity. While these are deadly risks, these can also become major opportunities for the world if we act now and develop efforts commensurate to this risk. Yet, the Women, Peace and Security strategy lies at the very core of the solution. While I wish to speak about the reality we want to see happening in 2030, in these 5 minutes I will also share one idea, one strategic proposal that could help us making strategic steps in the right direction, hopefully. Ladies and gentlemen, if we implement, as my colleague Pascal Berisville was saying, in 2030, women will be equally present at all levels of decision-making and leadership. And from the first years of school, kids will discuss about diverse modalities of masculinity and femininity. They will learn how to manage diversity and differences constructively. Peace negotiations will include participation modalities at all levels of society. Now, to achieve these results, we have to realize several efforts simultaneously and in parallel. While the Women, Peace and Security agenda has simply to be fully implemented, it also needs at the same time to get out of its own silo, to inform, inspire, and be at the heart of all the components of national and international agendas. Dismantling silo thinking and silo action is indeed key to the promotion of a world where women and men, girls and boys, can live together in security, equality and peace. I'm convinced that to get out of silos, we have to move from reaction to prevention. Prevention is early acknowledgement, prevention is early responsibility. Indeed, prevention involves timely identification and acknowledgement of multiple factors that could lead to degradation, increase of vulnerability, and destructive violence, all at the core of the agenda of Women, Peace and Security agenda. Prevention to be effective shall be a permanent agenda, owned and implemented at all levels of society and the world. Prevention implies a holistic approach and a global and inclusive action, as does the WPS agenda. Gender-sensitive prevention research, for example, shall greatly help to identify risk factors and suggest mitigation efforts at national level, international level too, together with the promotion of civil, political, economic, social and cultural human rights and the strengthening of the rule of law. These are main pillars of national, holistic and international prevention strategies. If, in spite of these efforts, tensions, conflicts, violence, or even worse emerge, the work continues, building further on the accumulated scientific knowledge and on these preliminary efforts. For example, hate speech, incitement to violence against specific groups, discriminations are early signals to be taken very seriously. The responsibility here is not to allow this to multiply, to spread around. And long before violence replaces dialogue, every effort must be done to negotiate, mediate, to recall the principles of international humanitarian law, to strengthen rule of law and human rights. And everywhere, always, the most vulnerable are to be protected. But when violence is already in action, we can certainly protect, but we can only react. It is somehow too late and too little. We prevent the fire from spreading further. Preventing thinking and action in the post-conflict and post-disaster period is part of the same logic. All efforts during this phase must include a preventive value. How a peace agreement is designed, how security sector institutions are transformed, how agrarian reforms are designed and realized, how resources are shared, how even citizens are protected and acknowledged as such. And here again, the common good in preparation will be much more meaningful and sustainable when totally and globally informed by the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Indeed, actually, I'm convinced that the great opportunity to strengthen the WPS agenda is for it to become the central pillar of holistic national prevention agendas and international gender-sensitive prevention agenda, reflecting the values, resilient values and capacities of each society in line with international norms and standards in all areas. Actually, women, peace and security as the core of an integral prevention agenda. Already in some countries, working groups, commissions and prevention bodies are beginning to emerge. They are by essence multidisciplinary. They bring together civil society and public servants and institutions. These autonomous bodies identify and name issues, recommend actions at an early stage. And to support these national efforts, a permanent prevention network, a global prevention hub with the WPS security agenda as its central pillar will support the implementation and help making prevention a reality on the ground, help making a prevention a permanent endeavor, a global consensus based on cooperative exchange, boosting complementarity between nations, highlighting diversity, and bringing together existing best practice. Today, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, we can make a difference, and now is the moment. We can pass from two inefficient reactions to consistent prevention, and the Women, Peace and Security agenda can become the central pillar of this new promising opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maud. Thanks for this very constructive, very good picture to move from reaction to prevention. I think a very important suggestion. May I now move to the next panelist. Joining us from Melbourne in Australia is Professor Jackie True, Mrs. Chu is Professor of International Relations and Director of Monash University Center for Gender, Peace and Security, and focusing on international relations and the realization of gender-equal international peace and security. Professor Chu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Siebel. I'd like to thank Vietnam and UN Women for the invitation to join this important panel. The 20th anniversary of 1325 is a critical moment for the Women, Peace and Security agenda. I think the agenda has never been more relevant and more important than during the global pandemic, as has already been stressed by Ambassador Na. Women's meaningful participation has been demonstrated by the effectiveness of COVID responses in countries with greater gender equality, often with women leaders. And the need for women's participation has been demonstrated by the near universal shadow pandemic of gender-based violence against women. In reflecting on the questions and where we need to be in the next decade, I want to highlight 3 areas of women, peace and security which need greater focus to enable women and men to be equal partners, enhancing the stability and resilience of societies. So first, women's economic rights are a foundation for women's meaningful participation, as the Swedish ambassador has already underscored. And these economic rights need to be further supported in the implementation of peace processes. Let me just give one example. On the Philippines, where women have reached 1/3 of peace negotiators in the agreements between the government and the MILF, while the 4 substantive gender provisions in the Comprehensive Agreement for the Bangsamoro represent a model of how to advance women's meaningful participation in an ethnically, religiously, and culturally diverse setting. Yet Bangsamoro post-conflict institutions are still male-dominated, and the gender provision that allocated just 5% of development funds to support women's return to normal life and participation has not been adequately implemented. At present, none of the 7 programs funded by the Multi-Donor Trust Fund for Reconstruction and Development has reported on this allocation, set aside for programs that benefit women. Gender-inclusive investment in schools and health clinics and infrastructure is contingent upon incoming donor funds and maintaining high-level political momentum at the domestic level. So the focus on women's participation in peace and security needs to extend beyond peace processes and emergencies to gender inclusion in the reconstruction and recovery of post-conflict, post-disaster, and post-pandemic societies, and within and across the institutions, the state institutions that sustain peace. Critical and new partnerships to ensure the women, peace and security agenda remains a priority are the second area I think that needs to be in focus over the next decade. And at an institutional level, partnerships need to be forged between states, the UN, and the international financial institutions to deliver on women's economic security. I would like to see women, peace and security concerns raised in international financial institution decision-making processes at the board level and at operational and country levels with civil society input and co-design. IFIs have crucial roles to play in women, peace and security, in gender-inclusive strategies for the prevention of conflict, and in the equal participation of women and men in the economic reconstruction and recovery of societies. At present, though, the World Bank and the IMF work is not well informed or connected to WPS. A women, peace and security lens could provide a necessary framework for these IFIs to address the connections between gender, security, economic recovery, and sustainable development. As a case in point, the World Bank's gender strategy refers to the transformative potential of conflict to alter traditional gender norms, but it falls short of comprehensively addressing the structural gender inequalities that may be root causes of violence. And it falls short of responding to the economic and social injustices that frequently result from conflict and militarization. I'd like to see states that are friends of women, peace and security, and board members of the bank asking questions about the gender impacts of strategy and loan programs in line with their Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan commitments. As has been done for human rights, I'd like to see trust funds, especially the State and Peace Building Trust Fund, used to develop a Women, Peace and Security framework that can be integrated into World Bank IDA consultations and in dialogues that are part of systematic country diagnostics and country partnership frameworks. Together, women's civil society organisations, governments and bank officials can identify and co-design ways to accelerate progress in women's socioeconomic status and rights, especially in post-conflict. Now, with regard to the IMF, it should be mandatory to consider women, peace and security assessments of macroeconomic, monetary and fiscal policies in all Article 4 consultations with countries. And officials should be required to consult with women's rights, civil society organisations at the same time as they consult with other social partners. There must be an entry point for women peace builders to participate and have a voice in the economic recovery and reconstruction of their societies. My third and final point with regard to the question of adequate financing for women, peace and security. Peace and reconstruction processes need to be translated into targeted assistance and tangible reforms to address women's economic security. Only a small minority of projects financed by billion-dollar-plus multi-donor funds since 2004 have gender-responsive objectives in the areas of the productive economy. And by that I mean infrastructure, rural development, agriculture and water, economic reform and diversification. Moreover, few states have committed to the UN target of 15% of peacebuilding funding to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. And less than 2% of donor assistance is currently targeted principally for this purpose in peace and reconstruction processes. Currently, the greatest increase in gender-targeted bilateral donor assistance occurs in the year following the signing of peace agreements, when there's greater attention to the achievements of gender provisions. But in our research at Monash University, we've found that these investments have not been sustained and, in fact, declined significantly 1 year after an agreement is signed. So even when a country achieves a gender-inclusive peace agreement, such as in the Philippines and in Colombia, donors are not scaling up the investment in recognition of this hard-won gain and in order to achieve the meaningful gender inclusion in a post-conflict society. So in terms of concrete commitments states might make for implementing women, peace and security in the next decade, closing data gaps in post-conflict financing is particularly important. I would like to see research funded and data collected that follows the money, pledged at donor conferences and peace agreements and post-conflict planning frameworks to see how and whether it is actually allocated and spent on investments in gender equality. Without funding commitments, gender provisions will remain good intentions rather than transformative actions. I'd like to see a gender marker required for all multilateral peace and reconstruction funding to identify how women's economic security and rights are being advanced and to publicly report on progress in meeting funding targets. In sum, greater attention to women's economic rights, to the role of international financial institutions in gender-inclusive post-crisis recovery, and to sustainable financing for gender equality in fragile societies in particular, will ensure that we are better able to prevent conflict and to achieve more resilient, more peaceful societies and a stable world in our lifetime and for the coming generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Truen, for highlighting the importance of the nexus between women, peace and security and the sustainable development agenda, and of course financing, a very important and key issue for the implementation of the WPS agenda. Now we move on to the last but certainly not the least of our panelists, and joining us from Bangui in the Central African Republic is Mrs. Kessie Martine Ekomo-Soigné. She's the founder and executive director of URU, a youth-led organization leading projects to increase effective engagement of and support for youth in locally led conflict prevention and reconciliation efforts in the Central African Republic. Mrs. Ekomo-Soigné is also a member of the Youth Peace Ambassadors Network, and we're very happy to have you as our next panelist. The floor is yours, Mrs. Ekomo-Soigné. We cannot hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, now you're on online here. Thank you very much.
It's an honor for me. And I would like to answer maybe to the last question regarding how to improve or create a space for civil society to be really include and lead the peace building effort on the ground. I think that as a young person actually living in a country, in a post-war country, I would say, for me the nexus between the youth peace and security agenda and the women peace and security agenda is key. Because I think that it's about something that are called the number obligation, the fact that women and young people represent a large and a majority of people living in countries in war. The fact that we represent as the creator of the future. I mean, not just in terms of majority on number, but also because we represent in terms of behavior, but also values that we have to spread for the next generation. So for me, one of the main things, like if we want to create a safe space for civil society to move forward, is to work on peace building. It's important to take into account the fact that young people are also part of civil society. And as I mentioned, having young people on board and women working together is, for me, something that is really strong. It's based on my experience also in Central African Republic, working closely with women leaders there. I see how, as a young women working on UP and security agenda, I start to shift and move forward to go and become women, a young women leader working on the women peace and security agenda. And I think it's key to really start at the international level to really think out of the box and how it can be possible to strengthen that nexus between women and young people. It's a reality on the ground, but I still realize that international community, the EU, the AU, the UN also still think inside some boxes that make difficult, like to create a condition to make the nexus between youth peace and security and women peace and security a reality. It's also important for us to challenge our perception of experience when it comes to young women actually in terms of their contribution to the women peace and security agenda, and also the experience that they have, of course, is different of the experience that women can have, but I think that they come with something that can help also moving forward the agenda of women peace and security. I will just have two last points, and the other one point that I have is having more men on board. I think that the E4C agenda, which of course is more on gender equality, is also something that is missing a lot in the women peace and security agenda. I think having more young women in the championing the women peace and security agenda, which help a lot. It's also based on experience that we have in Central African Republic, like having and mobilizing young people, young men to support the march that women organize, or the advocacy that women organize on the ground. It has an impact not just on the decision maker, but it also has an impact impact on the communities at the local level. And it helped to really challenge like the social barriers that we have a lot in some countries, as mine actually. And my last point will be on the fact that the nexus that I talk about between young people and women, peace and security, I think it's something that can become a reality if we start we start the conversation mainly with the mission, the UN mission actually working in a country in crisis such as mine. I think it's an opportunity to really, I will not say test, but I will say to start something that I think that will have an impact now, that when we talk about, when we start thinking about the future, it will give us an opportunity to challenge, to create a path that will help us to really put, to maybe do a peace building work that will be that will have an impact, that we have an impact. And my last, I said that I have a last point, but I still have a last one actually. And I would like just to say thank you to you for having us, having me as a young person from Central African Republic in that conversation. We do a lot work on women, peace and security in Central African Republic, but I think that having our voices here at such a level, I think it's really important. I will thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ekomosonye. I think bringing in the importance of youth is a very, very good way of closing up the list of panelists and to closing up your contributions. Thanks to all the panelists for their statements. I now see that the time has well advanced, and we have one statement that is announced, I understand, from Argentina, and then I will also invite Her Excellency Mrs. Matundu to another wrap-up statement of 1 minute, I was told, to help me close up the session. So I pass the floor on to Mrs. Aguirre from Argentina.
Tango Argentina.
Sorry, do we have a connection?
Good morning from Buenos Aires. I don't know if you can hear me well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for letting me the floor. First of all, I would like to thank the government of Vietnam for organizing this very important international conference. And also would like to thank your moderation, and also I would like to thank the keynote speakers and also the different panelists for the important remarks they have made on the topic. I would like to share my country's views and comments regarding the different discussions that were held today. As part of the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325 and commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and its platform of action, Argentina reaffirmed its commitment to the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that conflict prevention, peaceful solutions, and building sustainable peace will not be possible unless gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in all of their diversity are guaranteed. This requires increasing the presence of women on all levels of decision-making. Meaningful and inclusive participation of women will strengthen the contribution of peacekeeping operations and special political missions on the ground. Argentina categorically condemns sexual and gender-based violence and exploitation against women and girls and supports the United Nations Zero Tolerance policy in this area. We also condemn sexual and gender-based violence in conflict and post-conflict situations. We are deeply concerned about the increasing violence against women and girls during the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, we reiterate our support for efforts to end sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls and call to ensure accountability and punishment of those responsible for these acts. Our country's continued support for the Women, Peace and Security Agenda has been expressed through the launch of its National Action Plan in 2015 for the implementation of 1325 Security Council resolution. In addition, Argentina is part of multilateral initiatives aimed at advancing this agenda. Indeed, it is part of the United Nations Group of Friends on Women, Peace and Security, the National Focal Points Network, and the ELSI initiative, which aims to increase women's participation in peacekeeping operations. In 2020, there was a prioritization of the gender equality agenda at the national level in my country, with the creation of the Ministry of Women, Gender and Diversity. As a consequence, a very active policy aimed at giving new impetus and prioritization to the Women, Peace and Security agenda has been addressed. In this regard, work has been done on the following substantive aspects. With regard to the NAP, we are currently elaborating our second National Action Plan, and we plan to launch it soon. It should be noticed that both the evaluation process and the elaboration process have been carried out with the participation of international organizations such as UN Women, the civil society, NGOs, and academia. In relation to strengthen women's leadership and conflict prevention, we continue supporting the Argentine Women Mediators Network with Gender Perspective, and the third annual meeting of this network was carried out in September, in which the 49 mediators that integrate the Argentine network could share the activities done during the second half of 2019 and 2020. And we also promote the exchange of our network with other network of women mediators of other regions. And I wanted to especially highlight that in view of strengthening the role of women in the construction of regional peace, and considering that there is no regional network of women mediators in Latin America, our country is promoting the launch of a regional women mediators network of the Southern Cone with Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, and Uruguay. We look forward to launching this network with our partners soon. In relation with the participation of women in peacekeeping, the Argentine Ministry of Defense continued to increase the presence of women in peacekeeping and humanitarian missions, as well as their participation in their decision-making areas through the incorporation of military women from the commanding body. It also carried out a number of trainings to increase women's political participation in peace and security, peace negotiation processes, conflict management, and decision-making spaces. Training on gender issues was given to effectives before deployment. Also, gender perspective was included in all peace-building activities and humanitarian missions that Argentina participated, as well as in the disarmament, the demobilization, and integration activities. It is worth noticing that my country is participating in peacekeeping operations since 1978 to present. In addition, the Ministry of Security maintained the women's presence rates in United Nations peacekeeping missions in which Argentina participated with the police component. And at the institutional level, this year, the Ministry of Security established the National Directorate of Gender Policy and continues to training on gender issue to the police members, security force members, and the officials of this ministry. Finally, Argentina reiterates its strong commitment to gender equality and the economic empowerment of women, girls, in all of the diversity, as well as to strengthening women's participation at all levels in international peace and security spheres. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give this statement.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Aguirre. Thank you. Sorry, I asked you to identify yourself. Could you please state your affiliation?
Yes, my name is Silvina Aguirre. I work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Argentina.
Thank you very much. That completed your statement. Thank you. Before doing a very short wrap-up in view of the time, I pass the floor on to Mrs. Matundu, Vice Minister from Namibia. Ms. Matundu, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to conclude by calling upon the various international partners to support the International Women Peace Center, which will contribute to fostering collaborations among countries on women's rights in order to sustain the efforts of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You definitely kept the minute. Now, as I said, we're advanced, so I'm trying to make a really short wrap-up. But before doing that, I'd like to thank all the keynote speakers and the participants, the panelists here in Hanoi and all over the world for their contribution. I think they deserve a very big applause. Yes, they'll do it afterwards. Let me try to wrap it up, and I think the discussion was extremely rich, and it supported and it stated that the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda based on Resolution 1325 is absolutely key, and the document still promotes and is relevant. It also shows that development since the passing of Resolution 1325 brought a number of implementation gaps into focus that I think were raised here as well. Important is, I think, that women's meaningful participation in peace processes and their implementation need to be strengthened. Also, women's empowerment and economic security and access to resources has been mentioned as an important way to strengthen the agenda, and the nexus between the Women and Peace Security Agenda and the Security and Development, Sustainable Development Agenda was put forward in a clear way. Cross-cutting issues such as climate change, cybercrimes, health security, the digital divide, or food security, or natural disaster were issues that are mentioned and challenges that are there and need to be looked at. It was also underlined that women are and remain at the forefront of responses to crisis, to humanitarian emergencies, and to early warning. And the COVID-19 pandemic clearly was indicated as an example that brought these challenges to the forefront. The establishing and updating of national action plans is a challenge that remains, and it's important to implement these action plans, and also not to look at them in a statistic way, but in a dynamic way. Oversight is important and an element that makes national action plans more effective. A better gender disaggregate data is important, especially also to include gender markers. Partnerships were mentioned as elements that can strengthen in the future the importance of the Women, Peace and Security agenda and lead to a mindset. And also it is important to move from reaction to prevention and to fully include women in the Women, Peace and Security agenda. There's a lot more that could be said, and I think we've really had a very, very full and very rich discussion this afternoon. Thanks again to all the participants, to the keynote speakers, to the panelists, and we look forward to a conclusion of this conference in the next session. Thanks again very much.
Ivo Sierber, thank you very much, Ambassador. Thưa quý vị đại biểu, phiên họp toàn thể thứ tư đến đây kết thúc. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn Ngài Chủ tọa, các vị diễn giả khách mời và quý vị đại biểu đã dành thời gian tham dự phiên họp. Sau đây, xin kính mời quý vị nghỉ giải lao 5 phút để bộ phận kỹ thuật chuẩn bị cho phiên toàn thể thứ 5 và phiên bế mạc hội nghị. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn. Distinguished delegates, the fourth plenary session now closed. Thank you, moderator, guest speakers, and distinguished delegate for your time. We shall have 5 minutes break for technical setup, for the fifth plenary and the closing session. Thank you. Và phiên bế mạc hội nghị được bắt đầu. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn. Distinguished delegates, please kindly be seated for the fifth plenary session and the closing ceremony. Thank you. Kính thưa quý vị đại biểu, sau đây, phiên toàn thể thứ 5 về thúc đẩy chương trình nghị sự về phụ nữ, hòa bình và an ninh cùng lễ bế mạc hội nghị chính thức được bắt đầu. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông Đỗ Hùng Việt, Vụ trưởng Vụ các tổ chức quốc tế, Bộ Ngoại giao Việt Nam, trình bày tóm tắt một số nội dung chính đã thảo luận và nội dung cam kết hành động Hà Nội do Việt Nam đề xuất trên cương vị nước chủ nhà hội nghị.
Excellency, Mr. Lê Hoài Trung, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Madame Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Executive Director of UN Women, Excellencies, Ambassadors, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Vietnam, as the host country of the international conference entitled Strengthening Women's Role in Building and Sustaining Peace from Commitment to Results, together with Estonia, Finland, Mexico, Malaysia, Myanmar, Laos PDR, New Zealand, Norway, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Germany, are honored to introduce a document entitled Hanoi Commitment to Action as an outcome of the conference to highlight areas and actions that need to be scaled up and accelerated to advance the WPS agenda. Allow me to highlight the key messages of this document. We recognize the key role of women in achieving sustainable peace and development, whether as peacemakers, peacekeepers, peace builders, or as responders to crises. We commit to the promotion of gender equality, empowerment of women and girls, the realization of their human rights as an integral part of peace processes. We recognize the support and contributions of the United Nations, regional and sub-regional organizations, development partners, non-governmental organizations, women organizations, and other stakeholders to the implementation of the WPS agenda. We recognize the disproportionate impact of fragile context, conflict and post-conflict situations, and especially the COVID-19 pandemic on women and girls, and the critical role of women in the prevention, response, and recovery efforts. We recognize the disproportionate impact, we encourage gender mainstreaming in all peace-building processes and sectors, and further encourage the development of well-resourced national action plans where appropriate. The document goes on to commitment to take actions in 5 critical areas. One is strengthening women's representation and participation in peace and peace-building processes, and actions include ensure full, equal, and meaningful participation, representation, leadership, and engagement of women, especially at decision-making levels, at all stages of peace processes, at all levels. Recognize the importance of assigning clear, visible, and formal roles to women in these processes. Take measures to enable women and women's organizations to further their roles in peace-building processes. Second, enhancing women's economic empowerment. Actions are raise awareness at all levels on the importance of women's economic empowerment and participation in economic activities, including in resource allocations, aid management, planning, and monitoring. Foster consultations and apply gender-responsive analysis and inclusive approaches to support the participation of women and women's organizations in economic reconstruction and recovery. The third area is increasing robust financing for the WPS agenda. Actions are ensure financial assistance and funding to implement the WPS agenda. Enhance the role of women in decision-making in this process. Adopt gender-responsive perspectives in financing for post-conflict recovery and reconstruction, and investing in women in peace-building processes. The fourth area is integrating the WPS agenda in peacekeeping at all levels. Actions include mainstream a gender perspective into peacekeeping and peace operations through identifying key challenges and barriers to female participation in peacekeeping, prioritizing gender-focused and gender-responsive approach in training, and incorporating gender expertise in peacekeeping and peace operations. Stress the need to increase the number of women deployed to peace operations at all levels and in all positions. Provide women personnel with equal access to education, including through support for national and regional capacities. Utilize technological and digital means to develop and sustain a global platform for women peacekeepers to foster information exchange. The fifth and last area is promoting the key role of women in addressing emerging challenges. Actions are raise public awareness and political support for women's role and leadership in maintaining social cohesion and building community resilience. Ensure the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and gender-sensitive and responsive assessments in response and policies to emerging challenges, including conflicts, terrorism, climate change, public health emergencies, disasters, food and water insecurity, and illicit flows of small arms and light weapons. Mainstream a gender perspective in the establishment of sustainable frameworks and solutions to emerging challenges that have a profound and disproportionate impacts on women and girls. And finally, guarantee digital inclusivity and make efforts to refine, update, and publish data on women's role in peace processes and peace building. This document is open for co-sponsorship until the 31st of December 2020, after which we will submit it to the President of the General Assembly and President of the Security Council. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Đỗ Hùng Việt. Tiếp theo chương trình, xin trân trọng kính mời ông Lê Hoài Trung, Thứ trưởng Bộ Ngoại giao, phát biểu bế mạc hội nghị.
Of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam to deliver his closing remarks. The floor is yours. Madame Fuzile Lambo Fuka, Under Secretary General, Executive Director of UN Women. These Excellencies, ambassadors, representatives of UN organizations, international friends, distinguished guests, representatives of Vietnamese ministries, departments and locality, and all ladies and gentlemen. We have had 3 effective working days marked with numerous insightful presentations and discussion. The International Conference on Women, Peace and Security, hosted by Vietnam in collaboration with the United Nations under the theme Strengthening Women's Role in Building and Sustaining Peace, from Commitment to Result, has been a great success. Despite the serious development of the COVID-19 pandemic, our conference was still joined by more than 400 delegates directly or virtually from nearly 90 countries, UN bodies, international organizations, and Vietnamese ministries, departments, and localities, research institutions, social organizations, and high-profile experts and scholars. Through 5 plenary sessions and 4 breakout sessions, chaired and moderated by seasoned experts and diplomats, the conference reviewed the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Global Agenda over the past 20 years and the implementation of the UNSC Resolution 1325, our achievements, difficulties, and challenges in translating relevant international commitments into reality. Together, we discussed and shared experience and good practices, raised proposals for coordinating policy and shaping actions to promote gender equality and increase women's participation and contribution to peace building and reinforcing. Our discussion has shown that over the past 2 decades, we have made remarkable progress in ensuring fundamental rights of women and fostering their growth and progressive role. International community has maintained a strong resolve in thoughts and action toward the global agenda on women, peace and security, and other important international commitments, such as the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These commitments have been translated into concrete results. The proportion of women in peace processes, the UN police and armed forces, and national parliaments is constantly rising. Many peace agreements have included provisions on gender equality. Many countries have incorporated suitable elements of the agenda for women, peace and security in their national socio-economic development strategies and national action plans. On the other hand, we share the view that recent complex development in the global political and security environment, particularly the COVID-19 outbreak and its multidimensional influence, posed considerable challenges to ensuring the role, the rights and interests of women around the world. We have a long way to go from commitment to result. Our world today is still witnessing gender inequality in multiple areas. The presence and contribution of women to peace processes remain modest. Gender-based barriers in our society are still a significant obstacle to the aspirations and efforts of women to rise. Against this backdrop, the conference reaffirmed our strong conviction and efforts toward the realization of the 4 pillars of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Number 1, to ensure that women are able to fully and equally participate in the decision-making process. Number 2, to mainstream gender perspectives and women's participation in conflict prevention and resolution. Number 3, to protect and promote the rights of women and girls in conflict. Number 4, to meet the specific needs of women and girls and strengthen women's roles in conflict relief and recovery. We have received many concrete initiatives and proposals, such as the need to address the root causes of conflicts, to incorporate gender issues into conflict prevention and resolution strategy, to strengthen the role of women building and reinforcing peace, and to increase resources for the implementation of the WPS agenda. As the host country, Vietnam has proposed the Hanoi Commitment to Action. It contains specific recommendations for increasing the presence and participation of women in peace processes, advancing women's social and economic empowerment, and providing financial support for and incorporate the Women, Peace and Security agenda into peacekeeping operations at all levels. It is also an acknowledgement of the instrumental role of women in addressing emerging challenges. Vietnam hopes that other countries would lend their active support to this document and join us in authorizing it. Ladies and gentlemen, to Vietnam, the success of the conference is of great importance. The event took place at a historic juncture, as I have mentioned before. It is more importantly testament to Vietnam's foreign policy of independence, self-reliance, multilateralization, diversification, proactive international integration, and being a friend and a reliable partner and responsible member of the international community. The present conference and Vietnam's tireless contribution, both as the 2020 ASEAN Chair and non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2020-2021, we have affirmed our consistent policy of our party and state on promoting gender equality and advancing women's role and empowerment. I believe that the outcomes of this conference will be a solid foundation for us to continue to reach a common understanding, advance the global agenda on women, peace and security, and achieve more concrete results. Together with the international community, Vietnam will do our best to contribute to these common efforts. On behalf of the host country, I would like to express my gratitude to the leaders, senior experts from participating countries, UN bodies, international organizations, scholars, and representatives of the NGOs for your active participation and contribution to the success of our important conference. My thanks also go to the organizing committee, interpretation team, the technical teams, the press, and the team of JW Marriott Hanoi for their thoughtfulness, enthusiasm, and tireless efforts in the past 3 days. And the New Year's is approaching. On this occasion, I think we should together praise for a peaceful world of development, and then we can overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, and the women around the world will play a greater important role in all sectors of the society. On this occasion, may I wish all of you, your family, a happy and healthy and New Year with a lot of successes. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Excellency Vice Minister Lê Hoài Trung. Next up, may I invite Dr. Phumzile Lambo Angkuka, Under-Secretary General, Executive Director of UN Women, to deliver your closing remarks. The floor is yours.
His Excellency Lee Hua Trung, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear partners in civil society, I have the honor of concluding these 3 days of fruitful discussions. This is the largest of the many commemorations of the 20th anniversary of the 1325 resolution that have taken place this year across the world. Many of them have been virtual, so I want to thank Vietnam for managing to host a blended event, and a successful one at that. My sincere gratitude to everyone who worked hard for months through postponements and uncertainties that has been caused by the pandemic, and you still made this possible. Let me also thank the colleagues in the UN system. I would like to first thank the resident coordinator, Mr. Kamal Malhora, for the leadership that made this conference possible. I'd like to thank also the colleagues that have worked with the RC. Thank the Vietnam government, as well as the staff and the many people, both in the resident coordinator's office, as well as in the Department of International Organization. I want to thank the UN Country Office in Vietnam for all their hard work. This conference is impressive because it has brought together the many advocates of women, peace and security, and it has given us renewed hope. I hope that as we conclude, the community has renewed the commitment and has realized also the enormous work that still lies ahead. I hope also the hosting of this major global conference in Vietnam encourages the inclusion of young people and diverse stakeholders that are critical for the success of this agenda. I hope that all the convenings of this nature serve to strengthen our policy and normative environment, but more than anything else, it reminds us about the importance of implementation, which has been raised in this conference repeatedly. Let me also thank you for the outcomes of this conference, which have just been presented. And I hope that many countries will come forward to co-sponsor by the period that has been allowed for co-sponsors to come forward. I want to highlight the importance of partnership, another issue that has been highlighted in this conference. For example, the fact that we have to work together to address the atrocities that women are subjected to in the digital space and make sure that extremists are not allowed to use the digital space to further complicate the already difficult fight back for peace and security. I also want to highlight the importance of partnership for us to collect data that is needed for us to be clear about the successes that we want, as well as to be evidence-based in our decision making. And of course, it is also important that we have partnerships so that we can find new solutions to the new problems that we are seeing emerging in the area of women, peace, and security. We need to do this jointly so that we can also convince policymakers in different countries on the trajectory that is required for success of this agenda. I leave this meeting with the hope that the UN will not stop its much needed push for this agenda to be successful, because the next decade is going to be critical to set a tone of success. It is, after all, a decade of action in the decades that must take us to 2030 with much better results for women and girls. At the annual debate of the Security Council in the past October, the groups of Friends of 1325, which represent 63 different countries, called on the UN to aim towards making women's full and equal meaningful participation a requirement in all mediation teams, political transitions, and peace processes that the UN leads and co-leads. This is also a request we are making to partners who participate in facilitating peace agreements. Again, the issue of participation has been raised sharply in this gathering. The UN has therefore to take the steps so that we can propel all other stakeholders to follow suit. We also have seen the work of Peace Building Fund, which has shown us that it is important and possible to increase the investment in women, peace, and security. Again, I emphasize, as it has been in this conference, the importance of halting the downward trend in the investment in women, peace, and security. By 2028, we want our peacekeeping and peace operations to reflect the number of women between 15 and 20% as female representative. This will start if we also increase the participation of women at national level. The next decade should see these mountains of evidence that have been produced showing how desperate the situation is, making us move mountains in order to make sure that we fulfill the promise that the resolution promises. I would also like to again emphasize the importance of engaging young people, young peace builders, young peacemakers, while we also protect and stand with women who are human rights defenders. The importance of bringing in young people, young men and young women into this agenda can never be overemphasized, because these are needed for the future and to make sure that the work continues. Our civil society has played a significant role in advancing the agenda. We salute them, and we also urge them to stay the course and to continue their outstanding contribution on the agenda. And of course, as governments, as international organizations, also committing to protect, to support, and to make sure that we increase the investment in their work. In closing, I have to say, none of this would be possible without the dedication of many of you who have worked everywhere in the world to make this agenda move forward. When this resolution was signed, it was after Rwanda and Bosnia had seen unbearable atrocities on women. It was supported strongly by women in Southern Africa, in Central Latin America, and in Northern Ireland. Many of the conditions that were highlighted at that time still exist in the world, so we therefore cannot drop our guard. This conference must serve as a renewal for us to move forward, and I thank you.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn bà Phó Tổng Thư ký Liên Hợp Quốc, Giám đốc điều hành UN.
Thank you, Madam Undersecretary. Ladies and gentlemen, the International Conference on Women, Peace and Security, Strengthening Women's Role in Building and Sustaining Peace from Commitment to Results now comes to an end. Once again, may I thank all the delegates for your participation. Now we will move to ballroom number 3 to attend the gala dinner. Thank you for your attention and wish you happiness and success. Thank you.